Short run and long run decisions are really just different decisions. In the short run, a competitive firm is deciding whether to produce more or less output, and it's striving to maximize profit. Remember, they can't influence price, so their only choice is: do we produce more than what we're producing, stay where we are, or produce less? In the long run, the firm's making different sorts of decisions, so it might change its plant size, build a bigger or even a smaller plant. Why would they do that? Well, obviously because they think they can increase their profits at a bigger or smaller plant size. But they also may make a different sort of decision. That would be, do we stay in the industry, or do we leave the industry in the long run because we're not doing very well in this industry? There's also the issue in the competitive market: will other firms enter the industry in the long run, or conceivably will some of the other firms in the industry leave in the long run? So in the long run, what we're looking at, and again, economists are model builders, is we're looking at what's the profitability in the industry. For example, if all the firms in the industry are making a normal profit, then we don't think the firms will leave the industry in the long run. They're doing as well as they could anywhere else already. And there's an issue of maybe it's possible to change plant size and increase profitability, but it's not even obvious, given the information I've given you, that they would change plant size. Well, what if they're making economic losses? Well, one thing they might be able to do would be change plant size and at least make a normal profit. But if they look at this and they find there's no plant size where they can make a normal profit, what we think in the long run is they'll leave the industry. So when firms are making economic losses, we tend to think of that as a case where firms start to leave the industry. If the firms are making economic profits in the industry, it's not obvious they would change plant size, but it is possible they might be able to do better than they already are. What does seem like is going to occur is that other firms will enter the industry in the long run, because if you're making economic profits, it means you're doing better than you could with any other use of your time and resources, and other firms will find that tempting and will want to sort of get in on the deal to do better than they could with any other use of their time and resources. Now, given these circumstances, then let's sort of consider what happens. If firms are making economic losses, what would we expect to happen? Okay, we've suggested the possibility that firms would leave the industry. Suppose that is what happened. What happens then? Well, go back to your basic mechanics of supply and demand. If firms are losing money and firms are starting to leave the industry, what happens is the market supply curve shifts to the left. If the market supply curve shifts to the left, draw a picture of it. The price rises. So what you sort of consider happening in that case is the price starts to rise in the market, and the firms that can stick it out, that can survive in the industry, as price goes up, start to make normal profits again. Well, consider, if everybody's making normal profits, we don't really expect entry or exit occurs, so we don't expect anything to occur in terms of the supply curve. Things will stay as they are. If economic profits are being made, well, what happens when other firms enter the industry? What happens is the market supply shifts to the right. Again, draw a picture. Your model would predict that price would fall, and of course, what will that do to profits? It'll start to force them down toward a normal profit. So consider what we're saying. If a competitive industry is making less than normal profits in the long run, in other words, making economic losses in the long run, what we predict is price will rise, profits will move toward normal. If economic profits are being made, we predict price will fall and profits will move toward normal. So what you realize in this case is it's not really the action of an individual firm that's doing anything. The market is being forced in this case through competition towards normal profits in the long run. And if you think about it, what you're saying is this market will only stabilize when the firms are making normal profits in the long run. So we have this issue that forces us toward firms making normal profits. Well, when do normal profits occur? Normal profits occur when you can just cover your costs. To me, that means price is equal to average cost. So consider then that if we're being forced toward normal profits and firms have the ability to adjust plant size, as price falls, you expect them potentially to change plant size if they can lower their cost to increase profits. But this is kind of frustrating from the firm standpoint. If that increases their profits, the result of that is other firms will enter, and that'll push price down further. Think about it. Where is price inevitably being forced? And the answer is to the minimum of the long-run average cost curve. Because when price is forced all the way down to the minimum of the long-run average cost curve, consider, if price is at the minimum of the long-run average cost curve, if you change your plant size, you'll lose money, whether you build a bigger or smaller plant. Draw a picture of it. If you're at the minimum of the long-run average cost curve and a firm moves away from that in either direction, their costs will rise above their price, and no, they can't raise their price. So we realize that competition in this case forces profits to be normal, and if you think about it, it's actually good for consumers because prices get forced down to the minimum of the long-run average cost curve. In other words, in the long run, in this sort of industry, the price you pay will be no higher than the minimum of long-run average cost. Now, what if something changes? Well, there are a million possibilities. I go through one or two in the narrative lecture. I'll try a different one. This one I always like to use in class. And this is the way I always sort of start this. Start the industry stable. In other words, start the industry where the supply curve and the demand curve intersect and the price is at the minimum of the long-run average cost curve for the firms in the competitive industry. You can see pictures like that in the book. Draw them for yourself. So we start in normal profits. Now what happens if something changes? Well, here's a classic case. Consumer incomes rise. Okay, if this is a normal good, what do we predict will happen? Consumer incomes rise. We predict demand for the product will rise in the market. This sets off a whole chain of events. Draw the market demand shifting to the right, and you see the price go up. The price goes above the minimum of the long-run average cost curve. All of a sudden, all the firms in the industry become profitable because consumers are willing to pay more for the product than before, the higher incomes and the higher demand. Now what happens? Economic profits are being made. How will firms react? Higher price. Well, the truth is the first thing that will happen is in the short run, and the first thing that will happen is when price goes up, firms will produce more. All you have to do is draw a picture of this. Draw a price line, draw it intersecting the marginal cost, then draw a higher price line, and you're going to find the new profit maximizing quantity is going to be at a higher quantity than before. So our firms would be producing more and their profitability is up. You've already finished the short run. That's all there is to it. What happens in the long run? Okay. Economic profits are being made. The firms in the industry have already found the right plant. They're already maximizing profits, but they're doing better than normal. Other firms react to this. They look from the outside. They say, boy, it's easy to get into a competitive market. The barriers to entry are low. I can buy 100 acres and take up farming tomorrow if I want. I'm going to enter this market because the profits are so high. Well, of course, when I enter the market, I'm not the only firm. Other firms see this, so as firms start to enter the market, what happens? Answer, we just talked about it. Supply curve shifts to the right. Now what's going to happen? Well, we get this new demand curve, and the supply curve shifts to the right along it, and price starts to fall. And where does it start to fall to? Think about it. It starts to fall back toward the minimum of the long-run average cost. Because if it doesn't fall back to the minimum of the long-run average cost, firms are going to continue to make profits. More firms are going to enter. Supply will continue to shift. So the long-run implication of this is we get driven back to a normal profit again. The firms end up doing what they were doing before. In other words, when the price starts to fall, they start to cut back on their output. Their short-run decision as price is falling is to start to move back to what they were producing before. And so we see this sort of interesting reaction that in the short run, our profits can be above normal. This is absolutely possible in a competitive industry. But if they are, they can't be sustained. Firms will enter. They'll drive our profits down. It's a difficult life, and I have some sympathy for a farmer. Competition makes it difficult to earn profits above normal. And we predict that although you can do better than normal in the short run, the market will inevitably drive you back to normal profits in the long run. What you ought to practice is different scenarios. What would happen? For instance, and gosh, I could spend all day thinking about this. What if tastes and preferences were to decrease? Now again, and where do we start this all? Well, don't start a market in disequilibrium, an industry in disequilibrium. You'll spend all day trying to figure out what happens. Suppose we start at normal profits again like we did in the previous example. Now, taste and preferences decrease for our product. Demand decreases. What happens? Price falls. Falls below the minimum of the long-run average cost curve. Now we're losing money. firms will start to leave the industry, right? And as they start to leave the industry, supply curve starts to shift to the left. What happens to the price? Price starts to rise again in this case, and it starts to move back up toward the minimum of the long-run average cost curve. And this process inevitably happens until we're all making normal profits again. So it's not that difficult to predict what's going to happen in this sort of market in terms of demand shifts. We can predict price will go up. If that happens, we'll predict it'll start to fall. We'll make normal profits again. We might find a case where price falls. We sort of expect price will rise in that case because everybody's going to end up making normal profits again. I repeat, it's a difficult life. These firms are inevitably driven toward the minimum of their long-run average cost curve, which is great for consumers. And in the end, they do make normal profits, and normal profits are not bad. It means you've covered the full opportunity cost of all your resources, including your time.